Since the moment I first noticed a shadow of doubt in Jessica's eyes, a feeling of uncertainty was born in my soul. I, Michael, had always believed that our relationship was strong and genuine, that there was something eternal about it, like a promise made on a quiet autumn evening. We met at university when we were both 22, and since then we had shared so much, from carefree walks under a starry sky to all-night conversations about dreams and plans. But it was during that last autumn period that I began to sense something had changed between us. One evening, late at night, when the city was already settling into dusk, I returned home from work earlier than usual. An inner premonition that something was wrong wouldn't let me rest. In the kitchen, where the atmosphere of coziness and familiar calm always prevailed, I discovered Jessica's phone lying on the table. Its screen was bright, as if it had just finished a lively conversation. A slight chill ran through my body, and I recalled those recent days when she had grown increasingly distant and her responses had become superficial. Sinister suspicions began to take root in my mind, but I couldn't believe that I was so mistaken. Over the next few days, I tried to piece together fragments of information that grew more ominous by the hour. At work, I noticed her frequent absences and her recurring excuses, and then, one evening, I saw her with someone on the corner of our neighborhood. At first I doubted myself. Maybe it was just a chance meeting, nothing more than a friendly stroll. But when her laughter echoed in the cool night air, I realized that everything had long since changed. From that moment on, confusion took hold within me. The feelings I had long considered unbreakable began to crack under the weight of doubt and pain. Returning to our shared apartment, I tried to gather my thoughts. The quiet, familiar interior suddenly seemed alien and cold, as if every corner concealed a secret that I could not decipher. Lying in the darkness of my room, I could not sleep, obsessing over every little detail, the slightest changes in her behavior, the way she sometimes avoided my gaze, and that fleeting shadow on her face when she received unexpected calls. A sense of betrayal grew inside me, yet I couldn't understand what had set this infidelity in motion. How many times had I tried to talk with her about it, only to be met with answers that left me with more questions than clarity? One dawn, as the city was only just awakening, I finally decided to ask her directly. We sat at the table in our small dining room, where we once laughed together over coffee, and now the silence was louder than any words. I asked her what was happening, why she had become so distant. In her eyes I saw fear and pain, but instead of offering an honest answer, she merely smiled nervously and turned her gaze to the window, where the first rays of the sun timidly broke through the heavy curtains. That brief encounter left a bitter aftertaste in me. I understood that no answers would come, and that the questions would continue to torment me with each passing day. As time went by, I began to notice the small joys that once comforted us both slowly disappearing. Our conversations became rare and superficial, as if an unseen force was gradually eroding our shared past. I searched for explanations. Perhaps I had changed. Perhaps unnoticed cracks had settled into our routine that now threatened to destroy everything we had built over the years. Every evening, sitting in the silence of my room, I recalled those moments when Jessica was near, when her laughter rang out like music, and I desperately tried to find even a small clue that could restore the lost feeling of security. At the same time, a desire arose within me to understand myself, to pinpoint where I had gone wrong, and perhaps to save what had not yet been irretrievably lost. I began delving into memories, trying to rediscover the spark that had once ignited our love, but all I found were painful moments of deceit and unspoken truths. The pain of betrayal grew, turning into an unbearable weight that I tried to hide from others, attempting to appear strong and composed. Yet inside me a storm was raging, and more I wondered. How can one trust someone who once promised to always be by your side, but so easily disappointed you? One evening, as rain drummed against the windows, I accidentally overheard a conversation coming from another room. The voices were muffled, but the tone and the few discernible words exposed the whole truth. Jessica was speaking with someone who sounded as if they had long been close to her. My heart froze when I realized my worst fears were confirmed. Fear and anger intermingled inside me, and I felt as though the world I once knew was beginning to crumble. In that moment, I understood that I could no longer turn a blind eye. I had to face the painful reality head-on. From that morning on, I felt the chill of loneliness and betrayal seep into every cell of my body. Meetings with friends became infrequent, and every glance in the mirror reminded me of how I had lost faith in the idea that love could be unconditional and eternal. I spent long hours wandering through the city's streets, trying to find answers reflected in shop windows, in the fleeting faces of passers-by. But the answers always eluded me, leaving behind a bitter feeling of loss and emptiness. Sitting on a park bench where we once spent happy evenings, I tried to make sense of it all. On one hand, deep down I understood that one can't always control another person's feelings. That betrayal is not always the result of malevolence, but often a consequence of human frailty. On the other hand, the pain of realizing that the person I had trusted could so easily turn away was unbearable. I remembered the moments when Jessica had spoken of her dreams, when her eyes sparkled with hope and love, and I could hardly believe that it had all been an illusion, created merely to console us on cold nights. Days turned into a relentless procession of painful reflections. Every minute without an answer, every new ring on the phone triggered an avalanche of emotions that repeatedly bubbled to the surface. I knew the time would come when I would have to make a decision, to try to salvage what was already broken, or to allow myself to move on despite my scorched heart. My inner conflicts raged, and I felt that the growing sense of loneliness was pushing me to seek support in unexpected places, in old friends, in memories of when we once dreamed together of a future. This inner battle, so agonizing and earnestly tormenting, became the starting point for a chain of events that turned my life upside down. I found myself at a crossroads where every decision carried its consequences, and every attempt to understand myself resulted in a new wound. The sense of betrayal, like a knife plunged into my heart, did not leave me for a moment. Inside, doubts grew, and thoughts of how one could ever trust someone who had so easily shattered those once unbreakable ideals began to take hold. One rainy evening, when the downpour blended with my tears, I decided that I could no longer live in a state of constant uncertainty. I mustered all my strength and resolved to confront the truth, to face Jessica head-on and ask, why, how, and what next? There was no easy way to pose such a question, for each word might shatter the remaining vestiges of what once seemed unbreakable. But I knew that only the truth could free me from these shackles, even if the price was unbearably high. I remember sitting across from her in a small restaurant where we had once spent long evenings talking. Her gaze, full of anxiety and uncertainty, told me that she too felt an impending storm. I began the conversation softly and cautiously, as though afraid that in this chaos a single word might unleash irrevocable consequences. "Jessica, why has everything changed?" I asked, unable to bear the oppressive silence any longer. She looked at me with bitterness and fear, and then, in a quiet voice, she began telling a story filled with contradictions and half-truths. Her account was tinged with echoes of other voices, with recollections of moments when she sought solace and understanding in the arms of another. With every word, I felt the foundations I had fought for crumbling, as the ideals I had once cherished turned to emptiness and deceit. We both knew that this confrontation was inevitable. However painful the truth might be, it had to come out. And although I found it hard to believe what I heard, I felt that it marked the turning point that definitively shattered the illusion that we could be happy together. After that meeting, my days turned into a series of endless reflections and excruciating realizations. A new reality was taking shape inside me, a reality where instead of dreams of the future, a painful truth emerged, that love could be fragile and deceptive. I tried to regain my former confidence, but each new day reminded me that trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to restore. I began wandering more frequently through the nocturnal streets, seeking solace in the cold light of street lamps, where every shadow seemed to mirror what remained of our once happy days. This cascade of events, like a vortex, swept me into an inevitable downfall, from which I could not escape. With each passing day, the wound of betrayal grew deeper, and the pain more unbearable. The inner voice that once softly assured me that love is a strength was gradually replaced by a resounding echo of loneliness and disillusionment. I realized that the time had come to either try to reclaim what was already destroyed or to allow myself to move on, even if my heart was scorched. In the long, dark nights when I tried to piece together the fragments of my shattered world, I began to understand that life continues regardless of everything. Every new morning, as I greeted the dawn, I thought that perhaps it was through this pain that I would come to know my true self, that even in the most trying circumstances, there is hope for something better. These thoughts, like a quiet call for change, accompanied me, urging me to take that step toward an unknown future where trust and sincerity might one day shine again. During those days and nights, as I tried to make sense of the fragments of my broken world, I realized that I was not merely enduring a loss, but becoming a different person, one capable of accepting change. I learned to let go, to forgive myself for not having seen the signs in time, and most importantly, to accept that sometimes even the strongest bonds can disintegrate under the onslaught of fate. One evening, as the rain merged with the glow of streetlights, I once again gathered my courage and resolved to confront the truth. To meet Jessica face to face, to ask why, how, and what comes next. There was no easy way to ask this question, for each word might shatter what remained of what once seemed unbreakable. But I knew that only the truth could free me from these chains, even if its price was too high. I remember sitting across from her in that little restaurant, where we once shared long conversations. Her gaze, filled with anxiety and uncertainty, told me that she too felt an impending storm. I began the conversation softly, as if afraid that in this chaos, one word might unleash irreversible consequences. "Jessica, why has everything changed?" I asked, unable to bear the oppressive silence any longer. She looked at me with bitterness and fear, then, in a soft voice, began recounting a story full of contradictions and unsaid things. In her account, I heard echoes of other voices and recollections of times when she sought solace and understanding in someone else's arms. With each word, I felt the ideals for which I had fought crumbling, as those very ideals that had once sustained me now turned to dust and deceit. We both knew that this confrontation was unavoidable. Painful as it was, the truth had to come out. And though I could hardly believe what I was hearing, I felt that it was the turning point that ultimately destroyed the illusion that we could ever be happy together. After that meeting, my days became a relentless procession of painful reflections and sobering realizations. A new reality was emerging, a reality where instead of dreams of the future, the painful truth of love's fragility and deceit took center stage. I tried to recapture that old certainty, but every new day reminded me that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to mend. I began wandering the streets at night more often, seeking solace in the cold glow of street lamps, where every shadow mirrored the remnants of our once happy days. This cascade of events, like a vortex, swept me into an inevitable fall, from which I could not escape. With each day, the wound of betrayal grew deeper, and the pain more unbearable. The inner voice that once softly assured me that love is a strength was now replaced by a resounding echo of loneliness and disappointment. I understood that the time had come to either try to reclaim what was already lost or to allow myself to move on, even if my heart remained scorched. Night after night, as I tried to unravel my thoughts and seek new anchors in a world that now seemed desolate and foreign, I came to understand that life goes on regardless of our losses. Every morning, greeting the new dawn, I realized that perhaps it was through this pain that I was meant to find my true self, that even in the darkest moments, hope for a better future can emerge. These thoughts, like a quiet call for change, accompanied me, urging me forward into an unknown future where, perhaps someday, the light of trust and sincerity would shine again. In those long hours of solitude, I began to understand that each encounter and every trial on my path had been shaping me, transforming my inner being. I learned that forgiving wasn't about condoning the betrayal, but about freeing myself from the chains of past hurts. And though memories of Jessica still occasionally surfaced, they no longer held me captive. Instead, they became one more chapter in my journey of self-discovery. Time passed, and gradually I began to sense an inner voice growing clearer, while the world around me took on new hues. My morning runs evolved from mere physical exercise into a kind of meditation, a ritual where every step along the pavement symbolized a victory over the fears of the past. In those moments, I realized that the pain of betrayal was slowly dissolving deep within, replaced by understanding and, if only partially, forgiveness. One rainy evening, when the sky filled with gray clouds once more, I decided to take another step toward healing. I enrolled in yoga and meditation classes, hoping that the art of focusing on the present would help me let go of the accumulated pain. The first sessions were filled with doubt. Each movement and every breath felt both heavy and liberating. Yet with every lesson, I felt calm descend upon me, as if each new day was an opportunity to feel alive once again. It was in these classes that I met Lucy, a woman with a quiet but assured smile, whose supportive words made me believe that life could be warm even after the most terrible trials. Lucy did not speak of miraculous healing or the rapid return of lost happiness. She simply shared how she had learned to live with her pain, accepting it as a part of her soul. Her presence reminded me that there is always room in the world for sincerity, trust, and perhaps a new love, free from bitterness and deceit. As the days turned into weeks, I began noticing how, with every new day, the changes within me grew stronger. The inner voice was now louder, and the world around me felt transformed. My morning runs were no longer just about physical fitness, but they had become a meditation where each stride symbolized a conquest over my inner demons. With every sunrise, I felt that the future was not as unreachable as it once seemed. Encounters with people, sincere conversations with friends, and even a random smile from a passerby reminded me that the world is vast and beautiful despite its scars. One day, when the sky was clear and the air carried the scent of fresh leaves, I decided to return to the same cafe where I had once first performed before an audience. Sitting at my favorite table, I opened the notebook in which I had recorded my thoughts. Now the lines on the paper were not mere expressions of emotion, but a complete narrative of transformation. I felt that I could confidently share with the world what I had experienced, knowing that every loss was a step toward a new beginning, and every break was an opportunity to become stronger. The final stage of my journey came when, looking back over the years, I realized that every heartbeat, every tear, every glimpse of light had led me to a new understanding of life. Standing on the shore of a lake on a quiet autumn evening, I felt nature, like an old friend, embracing me with its cold arms, while simultaneously offering the warmth of forgiveness. The water, calm and shimmering in the light of the setting sun, reflected not only my face but the entire spectrum of emotions I had experienced. From the pain of loss to the quiet joy of rebirth, I remembered Jessica not with anger, but with the awareness that her leaving had been a turning point. A spark that ignited my quest for truth within myself. The difficult moments when I felt lost had gradually given way to a profound acceptance. The past was not a burden, but an essential part of my experience, the very foundation upon which I now built a new life. This realization brought me not only inner peace, but also the desire to share my story with those still searching for light in the darkness. In those days, I increasingly found myself seated in a small cafe among familiar faces, where sincere glances and the quiet murmur of conversation reminded me that we are all seekers, each carrying our own story. There I penned the final lines of my diary, gathering moments of joy, pain, encounters, and farewells into a coherent symphony of life. These writings became a symbol for me, a testament that despite losses and resentments, one can find harmony if we learn to forgive not only others, but also ourselves. Lucy, who had become my steadfast companion on this arduous journey, held my hand as I finally dared to embrace change. Her quiet support and sincerity were like a beacon, allowing me to look confidently into the future. Together, we dreamed of using our stories to inspire others, to create a collection of tales and poems that would unite those who had experienced loss and betrayal, but had found within themselves the strength to move on. We understood that every meeting, every conversation was a chance for someone to find their own path to healing. In the following weeks, I began to notice life around me taking on new colors. My morning runs transformed into a meditative ritual, each step on the pavement symbolizing a small victory over past fears. With every new sunrise, I sensed that the future was no longer as distant as I once thought. Encounters with people, heartfelt conversations with friends, and even the spontaneous smiles of strangers reassured me that the world is both vast and full of beauty despite its scars. One day, as I strolled through unfamiliar corners of the city, quiet alleys and narrow streets that whispered stories of the past, interwoven with the mosaic of the present, I discovered that every crack on an old building, every worn brick, carried the imprint of time and memory. This realization helped me understand that even the most broken structures can be reborn. On one such morning, after a run, I came across an abandoned park where time seemed to have stood still. In this place, nature, wild and untamed, had reclaimed the neglected benches and pathways, turning ruins into a quiet conservatory of memories. In that secluded spot, I found a refuge where I could be alone with my thoughts. Beneath towering trees, I dared to write a new page of my soul, letting the words flow freely like a stream carving its path through stones. I wrote about how every heartbeat, every small detail reminded me that life is not merely a series of losses, but an endless space for transformation. Those lines became a reflection of inner freedom, a moment when the pain of betrayal was no longer an enemy, but a lesson that could be harnessed to create something new. Soon, I began to spend my evenings in the company of new friends. People who, like me, sought solace in art and the search for profound meaning in everyday life. We gathered in intimate settings where each could share their story, reveal their struggles, and find comfort in words that seemed to heal old wounds. These meetings were a revelation to me. I realized that we are all wanderers on a road where every stop offers a chance to rethink ourselves and rediscover our belief in tomorrow. In dialogues with these people, I found not only understanding, but the courage to open up to the future without fear of confronting the shadows of the past. Meanwhile, my connection with Lucy deepened and grew ever more meaningful. We spent more time together, not only attending creative evenings, but also taking small trips out of the city, where the fresh air and endless fields gave us a sense of freedom and the possibility to start anew. On one such excursion, as we sat on a hillside watching the sun slowly sink below the horizon, Lucy spoke of the importance of letting go of the past in order to make room for the future. Her words were gentle yet firm, and I felt as though nature itself was endorsing this path of renewal. Together, Lucy and I began to contemplate a new project, a collection of stories and poems that would bring together the narratives of people who had experienced loss and betrayal, yet found the strength to move forward. We discussed ideas, selected themes, and sometimes argued over which stories were the most important, and which could merely serve as background for deeper reflections. This collaborative creative pursuit became, for me, a symbol of a new life. A life in which the past was no longer a heavy burden, but a source of inspiration for future achievements. Simultaneously, I continued my personal journey inward. Regular yoga and meditation sessions helped me not only maintain physical fitness, but also find an inner balance that once seemed lost forever. During one such session, sitting in a quiet room, I suddenly realized that all those nights spent searching for answers had been necessary to bring me to that moment of tranquility and clarity. Each meditative session was like a small victory over the fears and doubts that once seemed insurmountable. Yet from time to time, memories of Jessica would surface, the image that once symbolized pain and betrayal. But now, in retrospect, I saw not only those excruciating moments, but also the lessons that had taught me to value genuine closeness, to trust and to love without looking back. I understood that every loss, every pain, was not a reason to shut oneself off from the world, but rather an invitation to learn from our mistakes and become better, wiser, and stronger. One evening at the beginning of summer, as the city was bathed in the warm glow of evening lights and the sound of laughter drifted from nearby cafes, I received an unexpected call from Stephen, an old friend from university with whom I had lost touch. His voice was warm and slightly pensive, as if he too was undergoing changes in his life. Stephen invited me to meet at a cozy bar known for its calm interior and relaxed atmosphere. We talked for a long time over a glass of strong whiskey, discussing not only personal losses and joys, but also broader themes about searching for oneself in a world full of unexpected twists of fate. That evening, I realized that sometimes new connections emerge where you least expect them, and that even a chance encounter can open the door to a new phase filled with fresh ideas and plans. Returning home after that meeting, I felt a subtle excitement and a longing for changes that no longer frightened me, but rather inspired me to start anew. I began to immerse myself more in the world of literature and music, allowing myself to lose track of time in the vast expanses of thought where every note and every word became a bridge to a new understanding of life. One evening, sitting by the window in my small apartment, I recalled how the pain of betrayal had once paralyzed me, and I realized that time is the best teacher, capable of transforming the deepest wounds into profound wisdom. Around that time, thoughts of Lucy visited me more frequently. Her support, quiet and without expectation of reciprocation, became an important guide on my path to healing. We started spending more time together, not only attending creative evenings, but also taking short trips out of town where the fresh air and endless fields gave us the sensation of freedom and the possibility of starting over. On one such trip, as we sat on a hillside watching the sun slowly sink below the horizon, Lucy spoke softly about the importance of letting go of the past in order to free up space for the future. Her words resonated within me as if nature itself approved of this path of renewal. Alongside our creative plans, I continued my inner journey. Regular yoga and meditation helped me find a balance I once thought lost. In one session, as I sat quietly, I suddenly understood that every night spent in search of answers was necessary to reach that moment of calm and clarity. Each meditative session was a small victory over the fears and doubts that once seemed insurmountable. Memories of Jessica still surfaced from time to time, the image that had once been the symbol of my pain and betrayal. But now, looking back, I saw not only those agonizing moments, but also the lessons they had taught me: to cherish genuine closeness, to trust and to love without the weight of the past. I realized that every loss, every hurt, was not a reason to retreat from the world, but an invitation to learn from our mistakes and to become stronger, wiser, and better. One evening in early summer, when the city was enveloped in warm lights and the sounds of laughter drifted from nearby cafes, I received an invitation to perform at the opening of a new literary club. It was unexpected and somewhat frightening to step back onto a stage and share my journey with an unfamiliar audience. But this time, I no longer felt the paralyzing despair that had haunted me after the betrayal. I knew that my story was not solely about pain, but also about the possibility of finding light, even in the darkest corners of the soul. Standing before the gathered crowd, I felt my heart beat in rhythm with the soft strains of jazz emanating from a corner of the room. The compassionate looks of the audience gave me the strength to open my heart. I began to read excerpts from my diary, recounting the betrayal, the pain, and most importantly, how I had gradually discovered the light. Every word I spoke resonated deeply in the room, and I saw many listeners recalling their own losses and discovering sparks of hope they had long forgotten. When I finished, a profound silence filled the room, a silence brimming with understanding. I saw how people, worn down by their own struggles, allowed themselves a small smile, as if tiny sparks of hope were ignited in their eyes. That evening marked a turning point for me, a moment when I finally understood that each of us carries within an incredible power to transform, and that true healing comes when we begin sharing our stories, allowing others to see that even through pain, one can find a new life. After the event, many people approached me to share their own stories, telling me that my words had helped them view their own losses in a new light. On one such evening, as rain softly drummed against the cafe's roof, I sat with several new acquaintances, listening to accounts of how they had weathered their own crises. We laughed, we cried, and in those sincere conversations, I felt the pain of betrayal gradually recede in the face of genuine communication and support. Lucy, sitting quietly beside me, took my hand, a gesture that spoke louder than any words. I understood then that life is an endless cycle of phases, a succession of losses and gains, where every minute spent with loved ones is a gift. My old wounds, though still present, were no longer sources of despair. Instead, they became part of my experience, teaching me to evolve. In time, I realized that true healing comes not through forgetting the past, but through understanding its significance. Every encounter, every trial had been a brick in the foundation of my new self, built not on bitterness but on gratitude for the lessons life had taught me. I continued to write, to meet people, to take part in creative evenings, and each new morning filled me with the certainty that many beautiful moments still awaited me. Months passed. Months filled with new encounters, challenges, and small triumphs that gradually formed a coherent picture of my new life. I continued to search for myself in the tapestry of meetings, creative evenings, and long, solitary walks through the streets, where each familiar face no longer evoked the pain of the past, but rather reminded me that life is multifaceted and ever-changing. Night merged with dawn, and I felt that the world around me had transformed beyond recognition. The crisp transparency of the morning air seeped into every pore, giving me a sense of renewal and quiet confidence. In those days, I often took long walks through unknown corners of the city, forgotten alleys and narrow streets that told tales of the past, interwoven into the mosaic of the present. I discovered that every crack on an old building, every worn brick bore the imprint of time and memory, and this helped me understand. Even the most ruined forms are capable of rebirth. Then one day, after a morning run, I came across an abandoned park where time had seemingly frozen. Here, nature, untamed and wild, had reclaimed the abandoned benches and paths, turning ruins into a quiet greenhouse of memories. In that place I found a secluded spot where I could be alone with my thoughts. Beneath towering trees, I dared to write a new page of my soul, letting words flow like a stream breaking through rocks. I wrote about how every heartbeat, every small detail, seemed to remind me that life is not only a series of losses, but also an endless space for transformation. Those lines became a reflection of inner freedom, a moment when the pain of betrayal stopped being an enemy and turned into a lesson that could be used to create something new. Soon, I began spending my evenings with new friends, people who, like me, sought solace in art and in the search for profound meaning in everyday life. We gathered in intimate settings where everyone could share their story, open up about their struggles, and find comfort in words that seemed to heal old wounds. These meetings were a revelation to me. I realized that we are all wanderers on a road where every stop gives us the chance to rethink ourselves and to rediscover our belief in tomorrow. In conversations with these people, I found not only understanding, but also the courage to open myself to the future without fear of the shadows of the past. Meanwhile, my relationship with Lucy deepened and grew even more significant. She was by my side, quietly supporting me like an unspoken promise that even after the harshest storms, one can find a safe haven. Together we planned future projects, discussed books, music, and dreamed about what our tomorrow might hold. One day, sitting in a cozy cafe, Lucy softly said, "Michael, you know, sometimes it's in the darkest moments that we learn to see the light." Those words, full of deep wisdom, resonated in my soul. I understood that true healing doesn't come instantly. It is a long process, in which each of us gradually finds a way to transform pain into the fuel for new beginnings. As I continued to meet people, attend creative evenings, and take long solitary walks, I realized that my inner transformation was complete. I was no longer defined by the pain of the past. I resumed writing, and my texts became a reflection of how one can love life despite all its challenges. Every word, every line was filled not only with memories of pain, but also with gratitude for the chance to begin anew, to become stronger and wiser. Autumn arrived with its crimson sunsets and golden dawns, bringing a sense of calm and serenity into my life. In those days, I felt that despite all the trials, I had found a point of support that no longer allowed the past to dominate me. Every new morning was a chance to face change with open eyes, knowing that every step was a step toward a new me. I realized that life goes on, and that after every farewell there is a meeting, after every loss, a new chance for love and happiness. The final stage of my journey came when, looking back over the years, I realized that every heartbeat, every tear, every glimmer of light had led me to a new understanding of life. Standing on the shore of a lake, on a quiet autumn evening, I felt that nature, like an old friend, embraced me with its cold arms while offering the warmth of forgiveness. The water, calm and shimmering in the light of the setting sun, reflected not only my face, but the entire spectrum of emotions, from the pain of loss to the quiet joy of rebirth. I recalled Jessica not with anger, but with the awareness that her departure had been a turning point that ignited my desire to search for truth within myself. The difficult moments when I felt lost gradually gave way to profound acceptance. The past was not a burden, but an essential part of my experience, the very foundation upon which I now built a new life. This realization brought me not only inner peace, but also the desire to share my story with those still searching for light in the darkness. Then, one late spring evening, as the city was bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun, I received an unexpected call from Stephen, an old friend from university with whom I had long lost contact. His voice was warm and a bit thoughtful, as if he too was undergoing changes in his life. Stephen invited me to meet at a cozy bar known for its relaxed interior and unpretentious atmosphere. We talked for a long time over a glass of strong whiskey, discussing not only personal losses and joys, but also broader topics related to the search for oneself in a world full of unexpected twists of fate. That evening, I realized that sometimes new connections arise where you least expect them, and that even a chance encounter can open the door to a new phase full of fresh ideas and plans. Returning home after that meeting, I felt a gentle excitement and a longing for changes that no longer frightened me, but instead inspired me to start anew. I began to immerse myself more in literature and music, allowing myself to lose track of time in the vast expanses of thought where every note or word became a bridge to a new understanding of life. One evening, sitting by the window in my small apartment, I remembered how the pain of betrayal had once paralyzed me, and I realized that time is the best teacher, capable of transforming the deepest wounds into profound wisdom. Around that time, thoughts of Lucy visited me more often. Her support, quiet and without expectation, became an important guide on my path to healing. We began spending more time together, not only attending creative evenings, but also taking short trips out of town, where the fresh air and endless fields gave us a sense of freedom and the possibility of starting over. On one such trip, as we sat on the side of a hill watching the sun slowly sink below the horizon, Lucy spoke of how important it is to let go of the past in order to make room for the future. Her words were soft yet resolute, and I felt as if nature itself was affirming that this path of renewal was right. Together with Lucy, I began to think about creating a small project, a collection of stories and poems that would bring together the narratives of people who had experienced loss and betrayal, but had managed to find the strength to move on. We discussed ideas, chose themes, and sometimes even argued about which stories were the most important and which might merely serve as a background for deeper reflections. This collaborative creative pursuit became for me a symbol of a new life, where the past was no longer a heavy burden but a source of inspiration for future achievements. At the same time, I continued my inner journey. Regular yoga and meditation not only kept me physically fit, but also helped me find that inner balance which I once thought was lost forever. In one session, sitting quietly, I suddenly realized that all those nights spent searching for answers had been necessary to reach that moment of calm and clarity. Each meditative session was like a small victory over the fears and doubts that once seemed insurmountable. Yet, memories of Jessica still occasionally surfaced, the image that had once symbolized pain and betrayal. But now, in retrospect, I saw not only those agonizing moments, but also the lessons that taught me to value genuine closeness, to trust, and to love without the shadow of the past. I realized that every loss, every hurt, was not a reason to withdraw from the world, but an invitation to learn from our mistakes and become stronger, wiser, and better. One early summer evening, as the city was bathed in warm lights and the sounds of evening laughter emanated from nearby cafes, I received an invitation to perform at the opening of a new literary club. It was unexpected and somewhat frightening to step onto a stage once again and share my journey with an unfamiliar audience. But this time, I no longer felt the paralyzing fear that had haunted me after the betrayal. I knew that my story was not solely about pain, but also about the possibility of finding light even in the darkest corners of the soul. Standing before the gathered crowd, I felt my heart beating in unison with the soft strains of jazz echoing from a corner of the room. The understanding looks on the audience's faces gave me the strength to open my heart. I began reading excerpts from my diary, recounting the betrayal, the pain, and most importantly, how I had gradually discovered the light. Every word that left my lips resonated in the room, and I saw many listeners recalling their own losses and finding sparks of hope they had long forgotten. When I finished, a profound silence filled the room, a silence laden with understanding. I saw how people, worn down by their own experiences, allowed themselves a small smile, as if tiny sparks of hope had been kindled in their eyes. That meeting became a turning point for me, a moment when I finally understood that each of us carries within an incredible power of transformation, and that true healing comes when we begin to share our stories, showing others that even through pain, a new life is possible.